What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Hopefully, everyone's having a good day, a good week, staying warm wherever you are. It's cold. I'm freezing. It's 60 degrees outside. But I thought today we just bang out some football topics. A lot going on from the television ratings on the championship weekend. The Bills and Chiefs did a massive number. Some thoughts, the Senior Bowl kickoff today, and some thoughts in terms of the draft, especially as it relates to the Chiefs and the Eagles. Pete Carroll, Max Crosby, Tom Brady, a lot going on in Raiderland. Watched some of Aaron Glenn's press conference, so wanted to dive into just his situation from how the Lions are concerned as well, and then just some other topics out there. So we got a lot going on. You know, it's kind of a dead week. The Pro Bowl sucks now. I mean, do they even play a game? Do they even do it? Guys, do people even show up? Most players. Oh, Russell Wilson got added today. Drake May. Let's just cancel this thing. Now, the NFL would say, listen, you can talk all the crap you want about this. John, you don't even need to watch, but 5-6 million people will. And Google non-football events, how many people get that many eyeballs? I'll be like, hey, probably right. I personally would bring back the skills competition. You know, they had like moving targets. I saw this clip on Instagram, like 93 and Dan Marino and Favre. It's like, bring that thing back. But whatever the heck they do this week and the flag football game or whatever, guys clearly aren't that into it. But before we dive into some football, you know I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Here's the thing. Game Time is awesome, and they have you covered. You want to go to a concert? Me and Maria were just talking. Waste Management is in my backyard next week, 5 minutes away from me. And Blake Shelton, Post Malone, you name it, play concerts. It's a big week. Super Bowl in a week. If you're going to that, you can get tickets to any event, anything you want to go to, whether it's concerts, comedy shows, any game, college basketball, NBA, hockey, college hockey, baseball, right around the spring training. You want to go to a spring training game? Game Time makes it so easy. I'm telling you, price points, search by where you want to sit, search by the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, let's start with the championship game. And the Bills and Chiefs did a little bit over 57 million people. A lot of eyeballs on that football game. And I think what makes the NFL much more unique than the other sports, obviously, baseball and basketball and hockey don't sniff those type numbers for any playoff experience. But like those, look at the Dodgers Yankees, highest rated World Series in a long, long time. The two biggest brands in the league. Like, what were the biggest NBA games of my lifetime? Shaq and Kobe, included Michael Jordan, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, and LeBron James. Very, very predicated on either the major markets or the all-time superstars, and ideally combined. Where football, I don't need a major market. The highest rated NFC championship game in the history of the league is the Niners and the Giants in 2012. Perfect combination. You get the biggest city in America, the New York Giants, who'd already won a Super Bowl with Eli. You get Jim Harbaugh resurrecting the San Francisco 49ers, one of the biggest brands, also one of the biggest markets, playing in the NFC Championship game. That's a BP fastball. But what about when you get small markets like Buffalo and Kansas City? Well, forever in society, we all watched the same thing. When I was a kid, my television channels were the same as my neighbors. We had 5 of them. NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and we had like Local 31, where they'd play the Sacramento Kings games and we get some Giants games. I didn't even get cable till I was in junior high school, basically in like 2000. It's why when you look back at some of the highest rated television shows of all time, it's like MASH in the 80s or Cheers in the 80s or even the Seinfeld episodes, Everyone was watching those shows. Obviously, they were good. Most people would agree, but you didn't have that many options. You and me, I could text 100 people. I don't even know if I know 100 people, but if I texted 100 people and I said, let's all pick a show tonight and not tell the other one which one we pick, there is a decent chance that a small percentage of people would watch the same thing. It's like, do you go to Netflix? Do you go to Amazon Prime? Do you go to Paramount Plus? I mean, I go to my Roku. I have so many options. I can never find anything to watch, and I got a million apps of streaming services. It's like, how is this humanly possible? I sometimes have to rely on my mom. She's like, "Oh, the new Night Agent's out. Check that out." I'm like, "Ah, it's not bad." But I can go for weeks of like, there is nothing to watch. I probably should read a book, and instead I'll just watch some stupid show. But that's not the case anymore. And it's why it's so difficult to get eyeballs on things. We have a million options. I see it in the world I live in. The media, people that used to dominate in the profession of either talking or writing, or people that, let's just say, covered sports, you had to work for a major publication, either one of the huge newspapers or one of the major magazines, or be on the big quote unquote radio station in town. I'd say now all those are borderline irrelevant beside three or four towns. And things change. And it is hard to grab people's attention. Gary Vee has been beating this drum forever. We day trade attention now. That is the business of most people. It's definitely the business I'm in, trying to get people to listen and enjoy it and keep coming back and tell their friends about it and be entertained by this little old podcast. And I think the NFL gives us something that most people can universally agree on, whether you are, you know, just a diehard scheme head, like, I wonder what type of defense Spags is going to run today. Or just like, you know what, I really like Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson's fun. Andy Reid feels like a good guy. I'm a diehard Vikings fan, right? I just like watching the Vikings whenever they're on Sunday. But one thing is clear is when I was a kid, the other three sports were massive too. Basketball, baseball, and the NFL. They felt like all equals. But when you turned on a baseball game, you knew that Greg Maddux was going to play for the Atlanta Braves for a long, long time. I knew when Barry Bonds came to the Giants as a free agent, he was going to be there for a while. And I think in football, it's the only sport, basketball during the Adam Silver era, a lot of red flags during that time. I would say the number one thing that jumps out, guys leave teams all the time. It's been, I would say, define the Adam Silver era has been, I almost said waste management, has been load management and just player movement, which is fine. And it's no one has a problem if you're a free agent taking off, but it does feel like guys are always demanding trades. Hell, before I jumped on today, the Sacramento Kings star player wants a trade, and they're probably going to trade him. Why? Because that's just what happens in the NBA. Yet in football, when I say Patrick Mahomes, when I say Josh Allen, you go, those guys are going to be on their team as long as things are going well. They want to stay. The team's going to want them. And really, quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, more than likely, if he can stay healthy, is going to have a 15 to 20-year career on the Kansas City Chiefs. Josh Allen will be on the Buffalo Bills for a similar length of time if he can stay healthy. And we all know that going in. There's a decent chance that Travis Kelce, who will go down as the greatest pass catching tight end of all time, if he retires at, when the Super Bowl is over, win or lose, which kind of feels like it's going to happen, will have spent his entire career for one team and for one coach. Chris Jones, more than likely, even if he ends his career for someone else, will spend 95% of his career playing for the Chiefs. Trent McDuffie is at minimum going to get a second contract and play 7, 8, 9 years for the Chiefs. So you get this buildup of the reality television show that is the NFL because you get to grow with the guys because they don't leave. Now, I'm not saying that player movement doesn't happen. We get trades, we get free agency, but the main players, the stars of the show, don't leave unless someone wants them gone, typically with the team. And if the team wants them gone, like the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, there's usually a reason. Or Pete Carroll in Seattle with Russell Wilson. It doesn't just happen on a whim, and it rarely ever happens of I demand a trade. They usually go, cool, see you at training camp. And I think the NFL resonates with people for a variety of reasons. But I think the main reason is sign me up for the Bills and the Chiefs another 5 times. And you know what? I know what I'm going to get. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. The other sports just can't say that. Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto is a good example. He just got almost $800 million. He is in the prime of his career, in his mid 20s. He has been on 4 teams: the Washington Nationals, the Padres, the Yankees, and now the Mets in the last 24 months. Not ideal. That would never happen in the NFL. This ain't the little itty bitty tiny bowl. This is the Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hosting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a TD. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The crown is yours. Okay, the Senior Bowl. This is a all-star game, the top all-star game, typically for college players. And basically everyone in the NFL, unless you get a brand new coach or GM, but every scouting department is represented, and the majority of coaches and their coaching staffs and the decision makers attend this event because you get a ton of guys who are going to be drafted just throughout the draft, but first, second, third round picks. So guys that are going to be top 80, 100 draft picks. And I was watching today because it's just a good broadcast. My guy Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis and Rhett are just do a good job. It's entertaining to have on during the day this week. And it got me thinking, like, how did the Chiefs and the Eagles build their team? Because when I worked in Philly, and I think the last time I talked to Howie, he still does this, and now it includes his team, but he always put the Final Four in the NFL, their rosters, and I would imagine with the Eagles, it's all digitized. But when I was there, we used to have it on a board on his wall of the Final Four in the NFL. So he could just look at the rosters during the offseason because that's who you're chasing if you're not there. And it's like, how did the Eagles and the Chiefs build their team? Because we always say it. I always say it. I was always taught this. We hear it said nonstop. Anytime you watch one of these press conferences with a new coach, with a new GM, they all reiterate this, and rightfully so. Build through the draft. Build through the draft. Develop those players and then re-sign those players. The Eagles. Now, it's, when you look at a team starting lineup, defense can change by a player. Because if you come out with 2 running backs, a tight end, and 2 wide receivers, my nickel corner more than likely will not be on the field. And if you come out with 3 wide receivers, the nickel corner will be on the field. So it can change by a guy. But the Eagles and the Chiefs, their nickel corners are from their draft. I got both teams having drafted 15 of their 22 starters. But the #1 thing that stood out to me is all the Chiefs D linemen, starting defensive linemen, and all the Eagles starting defensive linemen are draft picks because both teams are paying their quarterback a lot of money. So if you're going to pay your quarterback a lot of money, you're going to have to draft well. And the most expensive position, non-quarterback, is going to be a defensive lineman. Ask the Chiefs. Chris Jones makes a ton of money, but they have drafted well around him. Hell, they used one of their other first-round picks a couple years ago on George Karlaftis, who's a really good player. The Eagles, their entire front, from Nolan Smith to Jordan Davis to Jalen Carter to Sweat, are draft picks. Because you look at their offense and you go, well, Howie, how'd you build this thing? They're spending a lot of money on offense. Right tackle makes a lot. Left tackle makes a lot. Quarterback paid. Running back, $13 million a year. Tight end makes a lot. Both receivers. They have invested a ton of money into their offense. But a lot of those guys are drafted. 7 guys on offense, 8 guys on defense. Chiefs, 7 guys on offense, 8 guys on defense. All their defensive linemen, starters, both teams drafted. And on offense, the Eagles, 4 of their 5 starters are drafted. The Chiefs, 3 of their 5 starters are drafted. And early on in the season, it would have been 4, but they had to, put the rookie on the bench. And I think when you look at the Eagles, their only starter on the offensive line who's not a draft pick is Mekhi Becton, who they're not paying much money. And when you look at the Eagles draft these last really 4 years, their first couple picks in each draft, they don't miss. And they have not missed. So that has allowed them to go through the ups and downs throughout a season with their quarterback, who has some good games and can be awesome. Obviously, is a great running threat and can be an explosive passer as a playmaker, but can have some bad games. But their team is so good and they've hit on so many draft picks, it doesn't matter. And this year they revamped their coaching staff. It's like all the talent, all their, hits on during the draft, it's all come together. The Chiefs, I'd argue, have the best coaching staff in the NFL based on 2 guys. They have the best head coach, who's also a play caller, and the best defensive coordinator. It's like, how do you beat that? And obviously, they got the best quarterback slash one of the greatest tight ends of all time and one of the best defensive linemen in Chris Jones, plus a ton of other guys they've drafted that are really good. And here's the thing: when you draft and you hit on the picks, you know them well, and they know you well. It's why free agency can be so difficult. Guy's a free agent for a reason. This is not baseball, where it's like, well, the Tampa Bay Rays couldn't afford him. Well, the Oakland A's, they just were never going to pay him. Every team can pay anyone in the NFL. They just choose who they pay and who they let walk. So when you're signing a guy in free agency or you're trading for a player, there's typically a reason. Then that doesn't mean he's not a good player. It doesn't mean you shouldn't want to trade for him. But he's available. And typically core guys who are high-end players, like Lane Johnson's never been available. Right? That's never happened. Chris Jones was never available. Travis Kelce, never available. Dallas Goedert, since he's been in the league, has never been available. Devontae Smith, not available. Jalen Carter ain't going to be available. So you got to take advantage of the draft. Not just the first round, but the second round as well. And both these two teams with Howie Veach have done a fucking unreal job. Speaking of new administration, the Pete Carroll, John Spytek, I saw Peter Schrager tweeting about it. The vibes were high. I got a couple texts from people in the league. Like, it was hard to not watch that and go, this is cool. Like, just seeing Pete's energy, how excited he was. And one thing jumped out. I saw Florio wrote about this. They mentioned Tom Brady like every other sentence. I mean, Tom Brady might as well be the majority owner, might as well be the team president, because Pete Carroll couldn't stop talking about him. I mean, he hammered that home every question he was asked. It was kind of crazy. So, this is where when people go, I didn't think Fox had to make a statement or have Tom make the statement a couple weeks ago. We all get it. No one actually cares. I get why people in the league cares, but I'm just saying, me as the consumer, just like, Tom, just call the game. I understand you're part of the Raiders. But the reality is, he's not just a part of the Raiders. He's a big part of the Raiders. And I think a big reason that John Spytek and Pete Carroll are there now running the Raiders is because of Tom Brady. And when I look at the Raiders, their team's not very good. Today, Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, I, like a lot of people, think I could see Myles Garrett getting traded. He doubled down. Not only are we not trading him, we plan on signing him to another contract and plan on having him retire to be a Cleveland Brown. Now, listen, this is a unique industry where people in charge constantly have to talk, right? Even like Fortune 500 companies, you probably only have to talk at like your quarterly earnings if you're a CEO. Like, you can just shut your mouth a lot of the time. Like in the NFL, a coach, he's during the season, he's mandated to talk like 3 times a week. And now, like your GM, Senior Bowl, the combine, during free agency, like there's just going to be a lot of microphones in front of you. Like, it's hard to avoid. So sometimes you just have to say things to kind of calm the waters. And other times, like you say something like that, I don't see why he would put that out there if he didn't believe it. And I don't blame him for saying that. Myles Garrett's going to go down as like a first ballot Hall of Famer. I would say Max Crosby has an ability, if he can stay healthy, like he's a first ballot would be strong. I mean, he's got a long way to go, but he's a Hall of Fame talent. The difference is the Browns, if they're just healthy and they get decent quarterback play, we all agree like they could be a really competitive team. That is not true with the Raiders. They're a year away from being a year away. And this is not Pete or John Spytek's fault. And I am pro the Pete Carroll hire. But the one problem is that this is not like, uh, just some reload. This is a true rebuild. And the only true asset you have, because Brock Bowers is a second year player, you're obviously, he's an asset you keep. Max Crosby is going to be 28 this fall. And he's gone on record and saying, like, I'm out of guaranteed money, AKA, like, it's time to change my contract around. I also think Max Crosby's been pretty open about the last couple of years. Specifically this year, is like, I'm kind of tired of losing. Don't blame him. It's not easy to play for the Raiders your entire career the last couple of decades. You lose a lot. And Pete Carroll, when I think Max Crosby, I think a guy like Pete Carroll. He's going to fucking love Max Crosby. Football guys, think of all the top coaches in the NFL. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, right? Kyle Shanahan, the Packers, the Dan Campbell, like they would all love Max Crosby. Max Crosby is a football guy's dream, whether you're a coach or whether you're a GM. But he's also the Raiders' only true asset to really help start this rebuild. And I think like you got to think long and hard. I texted, essentially assistant GM in the league. He thought that you could get multiple ones a player in like a fourth round pick for Max Crosby. One, just because, like I said, how highly he's thought of in the football community and just how his energy and everything changes your franchise. And you put him on the Lions, on the Packers, on the Bills, on another team who is right there, it's a game changer. You put him on a team with no talent and no quarterback, you can only do so much. And I just wonder, and this is where, John Spytek, Pete Carroll, they said all the right things. They don't really know each other, but they seem like similar, high energy, optimistic guys. Awesome spot for Spytek to go to work with Pete, who has decades of experience at the highest level. But if I'm John Spytek, like I would think about trading him. And you saw Pete look at Max yesterday and say, Max, we're coming, put out the word. Because Pete's not going to want to get rid of Max Crosby. So it's going to be very interesting. Now, there have been reports that the Raiders and Mark Davis shot it down last year. I just think the right thing for the franchise would be at least to entertain it. I think if you're not entertaining it, you're not doing your job because you're not even in the same universe, even with a massive upgraded coach from a roster standpoint. Uh, the Aaron Glenn press conference was awesome. You watch him for 5 minutes and you see why players love him. Obviously, he was a great player, and he told this awesome story about how a couple years after he retired, and he played in the NFL for like 17 years, he was freaking out at the television, and his wife looked at him and said, "You got to become a coach." And he thought, "Oh my God, that's the weight off, the pressure off my shoulders. I've always wanted to coach, but I felt obligated because I played football for so long to be like a stay-at-home dad slash a businessman." And so he called Bill Parcells, a guy that he played for in the league. And he said, "Coach, I'm ready to jump in head first." And Bill said, "Before you coach, become a scout." And Glenn's like, "I don't want to become a scout." And he's like, "I'm telling you, scout for a couple years before you start coaching. It'll help you out immensely, especially as you move up the ranks." And he hammered this home yesterday. He said that's the best piece of advice he ever got. I didn't even realize that he worked as a scout for the Jets, in-house and scouting college players. And when you look at Aaron Glenn, his resume is, I would say, probably unlike many people in the NFL. Head coaches, GMs. He played in the NFL. He scouted in the NFL, and he's been an assistant coach. He's been a coordinator, and now he's been a head coach. He's literally checked every box you could possibly check in the league. Those shoes are hard to fill. And I was thinking about like, Colin said this forever. You learn someone's value not by how, once they go to someone else, some other company, start dating someone else, just change careers, what they do in that new spot. What happens to the spot they left? And Colin's a good example. He left ESPN radio. How's that thing going? It's completely irrelevant and basically cratered. since the moment he left. And I think about this like Maria was just gone for 4 days at a bridal shower in California. Like the house becomes a mess. DoorDash gets ordered twice a day. I remember being a kid when my mom would go out of town. It would be like me, my dad, and my brother. It would just be a disaster because there are certain people that keep it together. And I was thinking it is harder to find a good defensive coordinator than it is to find a good offensive coordinator. Why? Because there are just more good offensive coaches out there than there are good defensive coaches out there. Honestly, on a given year, it feels like there's a very, very small number of good defensive coaches because it's as a great offensive coach, I don't have to be a great leader. I really don't. It's why when you hear you watch Ben Johnson or Liam Coen give a press conference, they don't inspire anything. Watch Aaron Glenn give a press conference. He looks like he's leading the troops out to battle and he's talking to the media because that's how you have to communicate with defensive players. And I just think, listen, Kelvin Shepard, who played in the NFL for a long time, who just started coaching in 2021, is now the Lions defensive coordinator, and I'm rooting for the guy. Saw McAfee, who played with him, loves him. People think very highly of him. Clearly, Dan Campbell thinks highly of this guy. And I remember on Hard Knocks, he was impressive. It's hard to fill the shoes of Aaron Glenn because he was twofold. He's clearly really impressive with the group, and schematically, he knows his shit. And you can't fake 30 years of experience playing for all those different coaches, then scouting and understanding personnel strengths and weaknesses to then work your way up as an assistant DB coach to become a DB coach to then become a coordinator. And I just look at the Lions like they just hired Johnny Morton to be their offensive coordinator. It's going to be pretty hard. Maybe it won't be Ben Johnson, but they'll be fine on offense. Why? They're way too talented. And if anything, just run the similar plays that Ben Johnson ran. Defense is a different animal. I've seen it with the 49ers. They have run through coordinators because, like, this just doesn't work. And a lot of it is just the way you communicate. And it's why they went back to the well with Robert Saleh. So I'm watching Aaron Glenn. Those are tough, tough shoes to fill. Uh, I mentioned this earlier, but the Pro Bowl, I just think that it's pretty sad that the NFL, and I would put basketball here, like their All-Star Pro Bowl game is just it's a joke. And I think this is definitely a product of once you start paying guys 30, 20, 50 million dollars, how could I take this seriously? I remember being a kid and hearing guys talk about it and how excited they were to go to Hawaii and take their family on a vacation. And this is like Dan Marino and Brett Favre. But what were those guys making back in then? Two, three, $4 or $5 million, which was a ton of money relative to society. But you're still not turning down a free trip to Hawaii. It was a really, really big deal. When you make $50 million, hell, when you sign $100 million contract, it's like, yeah, I don't really feel like going to Miami or Vegas. I take my own family to Cancun. I just do not care. The NBA All Star game, they could not care any less. Like these guys put in zero effort. Baseball is the only sport where they play the All Star game, and it at least this looks like a normal baseball game. But I would say football has now paralleled basketball. The difference is in basketball, they still show up. I would imagine there are some financial reasons. In football, half these guys, Josh Allen will be playing at AT&T Pro Am. I would imagine this in a couple days here in Pebble Beach. He does not go to the Pro Bowl. He just will not go because he wants to go play golf at Pebble Beach. Don't blame him. I would too. That was not the case 20, 30 years ago. And I understand you put whatever the event is, them playing flag football, and still millions of people will watch. But this thing, I mean, to me, it's no longer for me. I just do not care. And I think it's showing by all these players like declining invites. And once you start like Russell Wilson's going to the Pro Bowl, Drake May is going to the Pro Bowl, you lose me. And you lost me years ago, like when Mac Jones was going to the Pro Bowl. It's kind of sad. But there's as this business and the money flow to the players keeps growing and growing like it is now, this is only going to continue. We're only in the beginning of this thing becoming the NBA All Star Game, which is completely irrelevant. I just visually remember all hearing players talk about it. clips from there. Like guys used to really enjoy it. That is no longer the case. And last but not least, uh, sometimes whenever you see like so and so is staying, Kliff Kingsbury is going to stay in Washington. That was a report that I read today. Kingsbury stays in Washington. It's like, well, would he have been the Saints head coach? Probably not. But like if you're Kliff, you have another year where you're in the playoffs. I would imagine he will be one of the top candidates next year, which I do think is a little crazy. I think two things can be true. Kliff Kingsbury is perfect for Washington, is perfect for Jaden, and is an awesome offensive coordinator. Is Kliff Kingsbury head coach? And there's nothing wrong with not being a head coach. Ask Spagnola or Vic Fangio. It pays $3, $4, $5 million to be a coordinator in this league. You know, I'm watching Liam Coen yesterday, and I think I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast. I'm not trying to make huge reactions when press conferences don't go bad. He does come off a little weird. And part of being the head coach is not just interacting with Baker Mayfield or Will Levis. I mean, Liam Coen was an assistant wide receiver coach 5 years ago. I mean, it's an epic come up. Epic come up. It's borderline insane. Like, well, he did a great job with Baker Mayfield this year. Their offense was awesome last year as well. I mean, Baker Mayfield coming into this year got a $100 million contract for a reason. But I'm not saying I would rather have Kliff the guy than Liam Coen the guy. I just don't think he's a head coach. And then there's just nothing wrong with that. If you're Washington, you're paying him a ton of money. It's a great spot. You get to resurrect this iconic franchise. And yeah, props to him for just resurrecting his career.